The most devastating thing that structural violence can do is the erasure of narrative. It is the removal of the concept of story from a person. And people stop being people without stories. Whether they're morbidly fascinated with them or not, they become things. And things are simply manipulatives, things that you can move around, things that you can put towards a particular task. However enlightened that task is, it's a thing. So when it's a thing, then I can control the thing. And my suffering is less personal because there's no story. So I am embarking on a journey now of narrative with you. We're telling a different story.
Welcome to Everlutionary, a podcast about how we can heal and transform with the world. Every episode of my show, we explore conversations around philosophy, science, mysticism, social justice, how we can be change catalysts and activators and mobilize each other to create a world free of violence. I'm your host, Hawah Kasat. I'm so happy to have my boy, my homie, my dear friend, Chris, joining all the way from Oakland, California. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm present. Last night was interesting. I have 3 sons, and my son with cerebral palsy had a dysregulated sleep schedule last night. So having some gastrointestinal discomfort. And so that means for a chorus of audible vocalizations that are not English. And so we kind of have that reverberating through the house every now and again in a cyclical kind of way. So making the best of a situation. And I got a bunch on my plate, but I'm present.
Chris, you've been working in this space of healing and bringing healing to people and communities for a long time. Just for the listeners out there, when I first met Chris, we were in the Center for Whole Communities out in Vermont. And one of my first experiences, memorable experiences with Chris was you were training in acupuncture. And I just remember you had needles with you and you were supporting me because I was having some pain and some challenges in opening my hips. And you were like, you put some needles in and you did some acupuncture to support me. Do you remember that?
I do.
You've been an acupuncturist for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about what acupuncture is and how that informs your life and your work and why you chose to go into acupuncture?
Yeah. I just want to say I'm happy to be here. You sort of covered a lot of ground there from 18 years ago till now. And I remember picking you up in the van on the way to the Center for Whole Communities. We picked you up from the airport and we were fast friends. It was easy to talk with you. Worldviews were in alignment, super easy just to be in your space. So thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been on this path for some time now. I think I started in the field of healing sort of when I was in my adolescence. I became aware that I was growing up in an alcoholic family, and my mom had exposed me to some things around what they were calling self-help at the time. Went to a group therapy type situation, Alateen. So it's like teenagers of alcoholics, and it was an exploration of what doesn't get talked about and how family systems bear a lot of similarities when certain substances are involved. And so that sparked my curiosity around what it means to be in community, what it means to be healing, what it means to have recognizable patterns in life. And, as developmentally appropriate, those curiosities become parts of who you are. So I went to my first bodywork class in 96 in San Diego. It was the International Professional School of Bodywork. And it was basically a survey course. You got a chance to stick your toe into the waters of various applications. We learned the first third of the short form of the Yang family style Tai Chi as a central nervous system, stabilizing practice, respiratory practice, my first introduction to a moving mindfulness practice. And then we did somatic mapping. We looked at where certain parts of the body hold various emotions. And so several different people have said this, but I'll repeat it. We have issues in our tissues. Some of them are resources and resilience and healing, and some of those are, I believe, Elaine Duncan has defined trauma. She's the author of The Tao of Trauma as too much, too fast, with insufficient support. So, those things are, I would say, like layered into our being. And the various neuromuscular units don't just carry like a muscle memory, they also carry a somato-emotional memory. And so with that introduction of mindfulness and then somatic mapping, I was then introduced to circulatory massage applications. And that was, it was revolutionary for me to actually lay healing hands on someone, have someone else lay healing hands on me. Then they introduced us to deep tissue sculpting, which is effectively applied ischemic pressure or gentle, deliberate, and slow increased force for those who've never had deep tissue to, reset the function of a neuromuscular unit. And so it was very biomedical in terms of the hands-on healing modalities. But the philosophy underlying it was somato-emotional and largely based in Eastern philosophy. And I say Eastern because there's, a syncretism of sorts that happens in wellness spaces, because there's just such a difference between how we make sense of the world in the West versus the East. Very deterministic and mechanical and we'll say reductionist in the West, and in the East it's much more comprehensivist, contextual, pattern recognizing. So it's different. And one of the questions I had for my teachers, because she introduced a modality called Jinshin Acutouch, and it was like a proprietary system. And I said, well, why are you calling this Jinshin Acutouch and not Jinshin Jitsu? Because that was the parent lineage. And she said, well, this is my energy medicine and this is my interpretation on it. And I use 26 points instead of all of the meridians. I said, well, that's valid, but don't we all effectively perform our own energy medicine just by being who we are? She said, yes. But this is the system you're learning, and you can unlearn the system once you've learned it. And I'm that student, right? I'm the student that asks lots of questions. I'm super curious. In the West, that's seen as a sign of engagement, but in the East, that's seen as a sign of disrespect. Just receive the teaching. It will all be revealed in time. Use the guru, use the sacred path to guide. And so, that's the dance.
Yeah.
My personality wants to really interrogate the narrative, to dive deep into the questions about what it is that we're doing here on the planet, how it is that we are in community with one another. How do we find balance, peace, restore the appropriate function? But I think on a deeper level, how do I catalyze, or maximize human potential, be a catalyst for the maximizing of human potential or self-realization? And so that's been my life's work, various ways that I do that, but I came to it through those modalities. After that 180-hour course, I decided to do an internship. And that internship was with one of my Seitai Shiatsu teachers, Skip Canister. Fascinated by him. He said, well, you got to do 10 sessions with someone specific, and then you have to journal what that looks like. And at the time, I had been studying religion academically. And my professor and mentor, Willard Johnson, he was my meditation teacher, first person I ever did sweat lodge ceremony with. He was a Western European American who was raised in East Africa, in a missionary setting, and decided to study Sanskrit, became a Sanskrit scholar, and really changed his worldview through academia. And so any and everything he offered was, for me, like a let's just say a reimagining of what life could look like. So when I was to choose a subject, I chose my professor. And he was the person that I wanted to share this medicine with, because he was sharing medicine with so many people, and I wanted to really be guided by his process. And he would give me honest feedback and let me know what that process was like for him. Now, interestingly enough, he lived on Palomar Mountain in San Diego. It's just north of San Diego State by about 45 minutes off the 15. He had a pack of half Malamute, half wolf dogs, and one Dalmatian named Bodhisattva. And I brought my dog Bodhisattva, who was a husky shepherd mix. Didn't know we had dogs with the same name, but certainly both had bodhisattvas in our life. We all do. For those of you who don't know what a bodhisattva is, it's a being that has elected to be reincarnated in perpetuity to help someone on the path to enlightenment. So this was my dog, and he had one too. And the way that we conducted those sessions was he asked me to do the sessions outside on the deck amidst the pack of dogs. And so what that required of me was a profound sense of community. He was the pack leader, and I was there as a guest member of the pack. So I had to sense the energy of the dogs. I had to sense the energy of the space. I had to sense the energy of the patient, and I had to channel the lineage of my teachers while balancing my own process. And so that for me was like a profound initiation into the isness, like the present moment. Like you just got to be in it, because there's no moment other than that. It's never not now.
Yeah, never not now.
Right,
Never not now.
right.
Um, but you're very incredible at reminding me, but I think also all the beings around you. Chris, you said something earlier that I wanted to kind of come back to, and you were describing how your life work is a process of moving beings, including yourself, towards self-realization
Mhm.
and embodiment. On your website, at the on the front of your website, one of the main quote is, "Wellness is a process,
Mhm.
not a destination. Wellness
Mhm.
is a process, not a destination." And I know through my years of being in community with you, being in spaces with you, where I've seen you with other people, being the facilitator of space, but also being a healer, being a youth organizer, teacher, advocate, um, coach. I wonder, where where do you how do you interpret that? And how could you explain that to our listeners? How do you understand this to mean wellness is a process and not a destination?
Okay. We can kind of start with words, because words, they matter. And
They do.
yeah, and some people say spell it out for me. Some people say it's an incantation, to speak. Uh, there's a lot of different traditions. The Taoists say the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. And Genesis, they say at first there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It really just depends on your worldview. But I'll start with this word, human being. Human being effectively is a noun in proper English, but it's actually a word that ends in ing. and every other word ending in ing suggests an action. So if the human being is simultaneously a noun and a verb, that would suggest that in order for a human to continue to exist, they must participate in an ecosystem. Really, it's a recognition that consciousness must participate in an ecosystem in order for it to exist. So,
I heard
starting,
it's so funny. I heard ecosystem,
yeah,
and I think you might have, did you say ecosystem or ecosystem on purpose?
it's a alliteration. Yeah. So, like
Yeah.
different ways of saying, for example, coincidence versus coincidence.
Mhm.
Some people say ecosystem and some people say ecosystem, but I resonate more with the intonation of ecosystem because we are reverberations and reflections of the spaces we inhabit. We ask for the the earth or the stars or life to give us more life. And how do we do that? We accept her in through breath. We accept her in through food. We accept her in through light. We could get into micronutrients and all of those things, but it feels like a different conversation. But you ask from the world to give to you sufficient resources in order for you to continue to exist. They sit with you for a moment, you take what you need from them, and you release what you can't use back to the world. So in that way, you're a participatory element of an ecosystem, of an ecosystem. Like we are reflections of the patterns we live. So there is no um, static nature of identity. Identity is a moving target. And so when I think about providing healing or providing guidance or providing support, I think the best offering as a facilitator or as a healer is an inquiry, because people are whole, perfect, and complete in all the ways, always. And at the same time, on a parallel timeline, they are works in progress. So the role of the facilitator is not to dissuade someone from self-importance. We are all consumed by our stories, the resilience, the stretch marks, the scars told in flesh, or artwork written on our body, or whatever. Like we we are ourselves contained by our thoughts. And so with that, how we choose to perceive the given moment is limited by our ability to see ourself. So as a clinician, my role is not to dissuade you from being Hawah, but rather to help Hawah understand that in every direction, moving at the speed of light times itself is an expression of Hawah. There's nowhere Hawah could look and not see Hawah. Like the simple human believes their identity stops at their flesh. The more advanced human says, oh, I am a member of a family. A devoted human says, I'm a member of a community, whether that is racially or culturally or geographically, and then like a devoted community servant or servant of the planet says, no, I am an expression of humanity. I am everyone. And then there's a small group of beings on the planet that say, no, I'm actually the planet. I have a dear friend, Wahela. We talk about the different languages. She's currently teaching a course on Navajo and the Navajo language. And she introduced a word to me, Ya'at, and it basically means all that is. And when you are saying like good morning or you're giving a greeting, you're contextualizing yourself in all that is.
Right.
So if that's in fact the case, then Hawah, there's nowhere there's not Hawah. There's
Yeah.
nowhere one could go where God has not touched, right? Where light has not touched, where Chris has not touched. Like we are all of that, but it's not static. It's a process. So I believe the sentence that makes the most sense to me is provide situation appropriate stimulus to catalyze the homeostatic response purely from a biomedical vocabulary. Like you give someone what they need so that their body can do what it needs to heal.
There's so much I want to unpack right from that really quick. And
Yep.
for our listeners, I want to just back up just one moment because we started with the human being and the human doing. And I want to tie a bow around that really quick. And
Yep.
then I want to move into with you something you said also just now, which was about every person is already whole and complete. And so
Yes.
I want to kind of untie that process a little bit, those two threads.
Mm-hmm.
The reflection on a human being and the verb and the noun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also know in conversations with you I've had in the past that we've reflected on human doings.
Sure.
We spend most of our time doing things and not being.
I
And
statements,
being,
please, Hawah.
I, thank you, Chris. I statements. Good call. I spend most of my time doing things and not just being, right? Being is actively, even when I'm being, I'm sometimes actively trying to move myself into a place where I can just be, and make time to be without thinking about doing anything. Could you reflect on that noun and verb analogy a little bit more?
Sure. Parts of speech matter. You know, the way that we orient ourselves to feelings is by the arrangement of the words. So when we think about an act, something tangible, I make available to the world what's being felt by the actions. You can see what's going on inside of me based on what my behaviors look like. If there's inner turmoil or dysregulated states, then my behaviors will be in alignment. Do we have the ability to organize ourselves in such a way that, like, I'm gonna present one way, but I feel this other way? Yes. In fact, the ask in a structurally violent world is that people have to, you just show up. It doesn't matter the violence that they're experiencing, you know, whether it's explicit or implicit, you gotta just show up. Like it's just part of the it's part of the assignment. So
Mm-hmm.
when I think about the doing of things, we have a outcome driven society. We have a cult of celebrity. We look at our brand as the primary identifier. Well, what's your brand? Well, it's what you do. You know, it's the most common question when you meet someone. And what do you do? You know, like very
Yeah.
rarely do you enter into a conversation and someone's like, well, how do you be? You know, it's like the
That's, yeah, that's great.
you know, so like if you're a
I'm gonna have to
scientist,
start. I'm gonna have to start going around and saying, "Well, how do you be?"
right?
Yeah,
Because
how do you be?
it's a legitimate inquiry into the process of what it means to be who you are. Like
Right.
I genuinely want to know, how do you be? You know, and right? And,
Huh.
I mean, it's kind of built into different cultures, you know?
Right. True.
Like
That it's very. It's a very Western. I mean, I think there's definitely cultures around the world where how you be is more of the default. It's not just how are you doing or what do you
right.
do for work or living. Right.
All right. Like I just said, like ya'ate is like everything is.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
acknowledging you. Like
Yeah.
everything is, you know. In Spanish, como está? like, like what's present? Like what's here? Um, we have all different ways. Like in my friend circle, it's like, what up, though? That's where we start. You know,
Yeah.
what's good? You know, just it's an invitation into the moment to be with one another. So, um, yeah, like the idea of doing versus being. I mean, we have a whole podcast just on that. But
I love that.
um,
No, it's good though. I mean, I feel like you've helped solidify and crystallize that for me and I think our listeners. Um, and moving into the next piece of what you had said
yeah,
around the as somebody with a practice and as a
Yep.
clinician, you
Mhm.
see people all the time coming into your practice that need quote unquote wellness, right?
Sure.
That are seeking wellness. Your practice is called Be Well Natural.
Mhm.
Um, and you said something that really, I think, will strike a chord and does strike a chord for me. And I feel like other listeners probably have the same question because we often feel that we have to go and seek healing or wellness
Mm.
because there's something incomplete or something that's been diagnosed where uh, we're not in alignment or physically attuned. So there's some biomedical symptom.
Mhm.
Um, how do you take what you said, which is you're already, which is what I heard, reflecting what I heard, we're
Mhm.
already complete, we're already whole.
Mhm.
How do you relate that to someone who feels that they might be sick or not well,
Sure.
or not moving in a way that is optimizing their physical true capacity or potential?
Yeah, great question. I often say to someone, uh, sort of to walk you through the process. Okay, so you walk into the clinic and I say, "Well, what's your primary health concern?" And when you can identify what's concerning you, then you can identify where the attention is being directed. In the Huangdi Neijing, which is the Yellow Emperor's classic on internal medicine, there's two different sections. One is the Su Wen, and one is the Ling Shu. The Su Wen is the simple questions, and the Ling Shu is the spiritual pivot. So there are esoteric questions in both, but effectively, the idea that when a practitioner clearly perceives a patient as they perceive themselves, that is when the healing takes place. The rest feels a lot like smoke and mirrors, like magic, right? Like I'm just present with you in what's real for you in a compassionate and intentional way. And I apply the lineage and understanding of bringing your attention to what is excessively toned or deficiently toned, right? Like it is based upon like if it's full here, it's empty here, you know? How do you find equanimity? How do you find balance? How do you restore the function of a neuromuscular unit? How do you dysregulate uh, in your day-to-day life, and how can you self-regulate? My role in the clinic is to help you co-regulate and to
Mm.
teach you tools for self-regulation so that when you experience a dysregulated state, you have the wherewithal to identify that it's actually happening, understand what's going on in your environment that's creating that discomfort, and then make steps to make changes. I think we are inundated with stimulus all the time and having to sort out like what's mine, what's yours, is it coming? Is it going? Is this a structurally violent narrative? Is this an interpersonal, disconnect? Or is this something that's like, I didn't sleep enough. I didn't eat enough. I'm not getting the appropriate nutrition. And so once we've identified the health concern, that usually happens in the initial session. But in subsequent sessions, oftentimes, when someone comes into the clinic, my very first question is, so tell me where the hero's at on the journey.
Mm.
Like, where
Yeah.
are we at?
W-
Bring me up to speed. Where are we at in the story?
Right.
Because,
Where are we in our own story? Because you were talking about narrative when we first started, like this idea of
yes,
like the narrative change and how do we change the narrative? And a lot of our visitations to health practitioners is often somehow the inertia of that is some psychosomatic result of the
sure.
narrative we have about ourselves and our own wellness. So if I feel like I'm not well and I have this narrative in my head that I'm not well, not complete, then I self-fulfill that prophecy or that idea, right, in my day-to-day work, in my day-to-day life.
I mean, whatever story you decide to tell is the story you're telling. I'm not here to discern. Like what you just went through was a process unique to how you're making sense of the information, and that's fine. I'm it's much more of a like a clear mirror in a clinical space. Someone comes in because they want to see themselves. They don't want to see me. They want to see themselves, and they want to see themselves well. So to be well, you get the right tool. Sometimes the tool is a turkey tail mushroom to help the liver function. Sometimes the tool is a listening ear. Sometimes the tool is a swim in the ocean. Sometimes the tool is the right song or the right smell or a singing bowl. Like, I don't decide for people what is the situation appropriate stimulus, but if they come to me, they're coming to see themselves. And so I am a tool, and at my best, I am a mirror that they might just look into and see themselves. At my worst, I am a mallet that they could use to fashion themselves into the image that they want for themselves. Right? So I can be different things, but if you have a drill, do you use the drill to set a nail? Do you bang the drill against the... No, you use the drill for things that have a rotational function, because that's what drills do. So acupuncture provides electrochemical stimulation, like it stimulates the spirit by way of the nervous system. Like the human body has a multitude of senses, right? The human being is a pattern of a bunch of different things, most of which you are totally unconscious of. Like you've never once said, I need to heal this cut on my knee from when I was playing with my friend in the park. Could you imagine the mental energy required to like sit there? Okay, I can't play. I need to sit here and heal this thing, right? And that's kind of the funny thing about healing. Is like people come in to sit and like make the scab. Like, nah, what we're doing here is we are allowing you to see that you're cared for. And like when there's alignment, you feel safe. Right? The nervous system feels safe. So let's just really rewind a little bit and go back to acupuncture as a discipline.
Sure.
They're stainless steel, single-use disposable needles at this stage of, intervention. At this stage in history, that's the primary tool that an acupuncturist uses for acupuncture. So that means there's nothing in them. They're very thin. They're a little bit thicker than a hair. Some of them you can fit 10 needles into the hole that you would use to draw blood. Some needles you can fit 100. It really depends on the practitioner, the lineage. There are different lineages that recommend different gauge, different lengths.
And this practice, Chris, sorry, this practice is like hundreds of years old, 1,000 years old.
Thousands.
So acupuncture is thousands of years old. And I even remember reading at one point, there was a time when there were like the needles were like little spikes from trees, like like little tree, what would you call that? Just like natural, like wood.
I believe they're called needles.
Like splinters, right? Like needles, like tree needles, right? Or like pine needles. Like, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm having
no,
but yeah,
like,
I mean,
good.
so like metal needles is very much like a new modern piece, but acupuncture could be
not so
done
much.
with.
No, I mean, I've had this conversation many times with many practitioners about, okay, well, where do you think it came from? Now, I'm pretty sure at some point someone's shoulder was hurting, and then they whacked the front of their shin on a rock, and all of a sudden their shoulder stopped hurting.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait a second, my shoulder was just hurting, but I touched this spot on my body and now it doesn't hurt. Or maybe I caught an arrow with my leg and now my digestion is better. I've had runny bowels but this arrow made me, so like, I think deep contemplation of the meridian system, and I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. I just wanted to first talk about the tool, but I think whether it's deep contemplation or it's totally pragmatic and deterministic, people codified, wrote down, these are the associations that we are making with this. And let's see how we can systematize this application of thinking for this function. So let me just go back to the tool, because we're starting with the word, right? The needle is itself made of metal, and because of that, it conducts electricity. Now, we are electrical beings. We give off a charge. There are constantly changing, unstable bonds called hydrogen bonds within our system. We have a pH in our blood that's based on the concentration of hydrogen molecules. So potential hydrogen in solution is what pH means. So effectively, it's like, well, how much is in there? Well, that depends on what we consume through breath, through movement, through rest, through food. So if that's in fact the case, when I get stimulation through my eyes, my ears, my nose, my mouth, my skin, then my body has to organize that information. It's called sensory stimulation, or that's an electrical transmission, whether it's just a gentle graze of someone's hand across your back, or it's the light gaze of someone as you walk into a room. You can feel energy exchange. So with an acupuncture needle, you're placing the awareness of the organism at the site of the practitioner's choosing. We are choosing to bring your attention to a particular part of the body. And the reason we're doing that is because we've either felt a vacuity, meaning an absence, or a repletion, meaning an excess. So we want to disperse excess and we want to supplement vacuities. So that's Nigel Wiseman's terminology. He's a TCM scholar, phenomenal books. But yeah, we're all building on a canon of information that basically came out of a conversation between Qi Bo and Huang Di. Qi Bo was the physician and Huang Di was the emperor. Now, I think that is a metaphor, but it's also a people. Like it's like you and I.
You think it's a metaphor for what?
The conversation we're having right now, bro, is no different. It just happened
Right.
thousands of years ago. Like you're the emperor and I'm the physician, and you're saying, tell me about my body. Tell me
Right.
about this medicine. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, don't wait until you're thirsty to start digging your well. Don't wait
Yeah.
until the battle has begun to start forging your weapons. These are things that come.
Wellness is a process, not a destination.
Right. So
Exactly.
like, and
you got to be
bodies
in it
take
all the time.
right. And bodies take the shape of life. So you look like what you do. You look like where you've been. You look like the tools you use. You tell stories to the world about the way you feel inside. What's happening in the world is almost immaterial because your perspective shapes your perception, and your perception shapes your identity, and your identity shapes the way you participate in the story. So let's go back to perspective. You know, we had that little technological experience earlier. Can you move back? Can you move forward? Can you sit up? Can you sit down? Can you, like, all of these things to like orient me in the frame of the camera for the purposes of having the right perspective. Our head's got to be the same size. We got to have the same line of sight. Well, why? So that it feels like an equal conversation. Like, I get it. But perspective and subtle shifts in it can provide such profound information to an organism, so much so that like the endocrine response to the nervous system is a release of hormones or shapes. Like I often say this to my clients, vibes become things.
Yeah.
Right? And if vibes become things, that means waves become particles.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
now the electrical stimulation of the acupuncture needle, the nervous system sends a relay from the peripheral nervous system to the postsynaptic ganglion, which is a nerve bulb sitting just off of the spine. And then it propagates up to the brain. Sometimes it doesn't need it. Sometimes it's just like, okay, this is where you're at in space. This is proprioception. You don't need a higher order process. You just need to take your hand off the stove. So some would say that the interruption happens where the peripheral nervous system meets the central nervous system. And then your brain has a reaction and it releases a series of hormones. We could call that the endocrine system or the hormonal system, and it tells us what to feel. There's a very commonly referred to vasovagal theory, which is looking at the vagus nerve, the ventral and the dorsal aspects, upregulating sympathetic nervous system, or downregulating sympathetic nervous system, or upregulating parasympathetic, or downregulating parasympathetic. In layman's terms, like, are you excited or are you relaxed? Are you sort of at the ready or are you on chill? So that vasovagal theory, again, Elaine Duncan, phenomenal author, phenomenal clinician, used the Tao of trauma to explain the 5 different phases, according to our 5-element theory, of excitation of the vasovagal complex. That is a high order conversation, primarily for clinicians. But the long and the short of it is, once I get nervous system stimulation, then I get a hormonal reaction, then there is a neuromuscular or a mechanical interpretation of those chemicals. So vibes become things take shape, those shapes are in patterns are recognizable. So if you look at your body today, it probably looks really similar to what it did yesterday. And the reason why is because you've been Hawah-ing for 40 some years, and the patterns are ingrained. I think about
Yeah.
stretch marks and scars are stories of healing and resilience told through flesh. There are non-visible stretch marks and scars that we carry around in our consciousness that shape our perspective. So a seemingly healing moment for one who has stretch marks and scars, and the way that they interpret information, because the perspective that they hold, could be considered a traumatic event for someone else, like a healing
Absolutely.
moment. Right. So
Absolutely.
the very same words that I say to you could land differently with someone else.
Absolutely. I mean, I love, and I mean, the idea of stretch marks and scars, also of the consciousness, is, I think, a really important idea to lift up too, because I see that, and you've tied that thread a little bit earlier. You kind of dropped it and kept expanding, but you dropped this piece around what's happening structurally, sometimes in some ways is immaterial. And the stretch mark and the scars of consciousness are something that do guide the stories and the narratives that I am playing into in my own life, right? And, using I statements, I'll speak to what I see, what I reflect to, what I respond to. My perspective of the world is very shaped by my identity. And there is a moment here where I'd like to try to bridge for our listeners who are around the globe. I'd like to bridge what is a conversation we've been having around health, wellness, acupuncture, and healing. And what I'm hearing too is balancing. We're doing a lot of balancing. There's a balancing of energies.
We're not balancing. You are balance.
Right.
In how you be, you are balance. There's no time you're not in balance. Do you have health concerns about your current state? Sure. Do you have confidence in your analysis? Yes. But we don't balance anything. You are balance. And that's the subtle shift in perspective.
And would you, and just gonna, just expanding that, would you say that? So somebody who, and I know you're not working in hospital settings like this, but like if somebody comes in and they've got, let's say, a terminal cancer, would you say that you are balanced?
Yeah. I mean, you're a reflection of what you've been paying attention to. Like in the West, I read this article when I was in school. Americans have a morbid fascination with our own pathology. We become trauma identified. So like that which we perceive of as our disease becomes a part of who we are. So I believe cancer is a verb, just like human being is a verb. I'd actually, I think we've had this conversation before. I don't believe in nouns. I think nouns are a literary device that that underlie, at least the concept of noun underlies a worldview of what I would term a social illness. I mean, there's so many ways this conversation could go, but I'm going to try and just like keep it in the realm of like health and well-being, because that's kind of where we started.
Yeah.
Someone comes in and they've received a diagnosis. That is no different to me than they have a profile picture on their social media. That is the moment at which they've captured the pattern that they are in. Does that pattern change? Sure. If you create an inhospitable environment for the cancer to continue to proliferate, it will cease to proliferate. If you create an inhospitable environment for Hawah to persist, Hawah will cease to exist. So, like, this is what happens. So, as a clinician who comes in, I don't treat cancer. I don't treat injuries. I treat humans. I am a catalyst for optimizing human potential, maximizing human potential. That's what I do. So when people come in, I'm not focused on their disease. I'm present with them. I'm listening to them. And so to take it out into the world, I was so moved by the work I was able to do in a one-on-one space and like restore neuromuscular function and help to ameliorate suffering, because like it's tangible. If I have pain, there was this is a Buddhist monk that I was listening to on IG. He said, if you have health in your life, you have 1,000 problems, right? If you have disease in your life, you have one. You have one problem. And so I was fascinated by this idea, right? Like, okay, well, from the one comes two, from the two comes three, from the three come the 10,000 things. And if we're looking at like the source energy, then once I can perceive the source, then there's self and there's other. So that's two. And then I can divide that one and two into three: heaven, earth, and human. I stand between those things. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean as a person of African descent growing up in the United States in a structurally violent world where I know that the fictions of social construction are real? They have a real world implication. I get a different experience at a traffic stop than my dark-skinned father. I get a different experience at a traffic stop than my white mother. Those things are real. Those things are not fictions, but they are also part of patterns. And we can disrupt patterns by way of shifting perspective. If I participate in the story in the way that the story is scripted, then I believe in the fictions. For example, peoples of African descent were brought here with the expressed intent of what I would call brain drain. We are given the fiction that they were brought here 4 generations ago. My ancestors were brought here to do labor. That's partially true, but intellectual labor, emotional labor, all of the different types of labor, there were so many different skills that were part of the diaspora. There were mathematicians, there were scientists, there were agriculturalists, there were, there were people who were not simply picking cotton. Like this is like a myth. So if that is in fact the case, like all of these different intelligences that are associated with being here, I have to acknowledge in myself, like, who I am impacts what I see, impacts how I see it. And so I looked, because I have a mirror at home. I see myself and I'm like, well, the world allows me access to certain things because I have green eyes. The world allows me access to certain things because I have brown skin. The world limits my access to things because I have green eyes. The world limits my access to things because I have brown skin. There are different suggestions for how I'm supposed to be in the world based on how I present. Right? So, like, going back to this extraction of black body, or the creation of the concept of a black body, being here in the United States as a sovereign being that thinks and feels for themselves, by virtue of the legislation and the way things are written, is a criminal enterprise. To do anything for myself, to not serve a system, is like, it's a criminal act. Because going back to narrative and sort of tying this all back in,
Right.
the most devastating thing that structural violence can do is the erasure of narrative. It is the removal of the concept of story from a person. And people stop being people without stories. Whether they're morbidly fascinated with them or not, they become things. And things are simply manipulatives. Things that you can move around. Things that you can put towards a particular task. However enlightened that task is, it's a thing. So when it's a thing, then I can control the thing. And my suffering is less personal because there's no story. So I am embarking on a journey now of narrative with you. We're telling a different story. And in my recent months, I've been exploring this idea of perspective, how it shapes perception, perception and how it shapes identity, identity and how it shapes narrative, how we participate in story, and looking at the diaspora coming to the continent, spreading out into urban centers, moving through the world, and then back into the world.
So, question for you.
Yeah.
The 4 generations ago, when the transatlantic slave trade was taking place, you were speaking earlier about how we're already balanced, that there is no balance to restore.
Yes.
In the material world, the structural violence, am I hearing you correctly? Am I hearing you say that things are actually in balance right now in the planet? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So I have to,
because I need to interrogate that a little bit, because that's a growth edge for me. Because right now I see the world in imbalance.
Sure.
And this is my perception. This is my identity. I know this is my story.
Yeah.
But my story and the way that I'm being fed stimulus in this moment is, I see the world in deep imbalance. I see rainforests being chopped down at rates that are unconscionable. I see, the oceans being polluted. I see riverways being extracted of all the fish. I don't see us in balance with the natural world. I don't see the human species as a species right now that is embodying the archetype of balance. So I am challenged slightly by what you said earlier, because I do wonder. I want to investigate that a little bit. I'm curious about. In my perspective, there is not balance right now. But what I heard was, in your perspective, there is already a balance, and we're constantly in balance. So can you please thread that or unpack that more for me?
This intellectual exercise is a potent one, and I think an important one, but it is part of a process. So what if humans are showing exactly what's going on inside? And if that's the case, I've heard it said we are in the death throes of a dying world. I've heard that what's happening is the world is in chaos. Well, no, I believe the individual is in chaos. I believe the sense that Hawah is separate from the reality that Hawah is perceiving is a chaotic thing. Do things happen to me? Yeah, sure. Do things happen for me? Yeah, sure. Do things happen through me? Yeah, sure. It's all of those things. Like it's all happening all at once. But there's a certain level of participation that is only rooted in process. Like I can't tell uh, Donald Trump or any of the other world leaders what to do in some material way where it will change what's happening. I can't change the way that the Supreme Court weighs in on a decision ending birthright citizenship and questioning the very nature of citizenship itself. I don't have the leverage, the identifiable brand,
The influence.
well, the proximity to that
Yeah,
story.
right.
So that's not my story to tell.
Got it.
My story to tell is the one I'm telling. And so you can have a cancer in a body and everything else is functioning perfectly normally. But the dysregulated state of that one part of the organism means the organism can no longer exist. And so do I stop functioning the way that I function because there is a dysregulated state elsewhere? No, I work to refine my consciousness so that I might bring into the world the awareness that I hold. And that's really all I can do. And so I believe love, for, lack of a better word or, a cliche or whatever, quite simply is the only way. It is the only way. And when I can connect honestly and sincerely with a process, then that transforms the journey. So yes, interrogate the narrative. Yes, interrogate what's going on for Hawah. You are in a state of profound personal change. You're changing coasts, you're changing relationships, you're changing all of these different things. And that's what's real for you. Like that's your day to day. That's not my story. You weren't up listening to your nonverbal child last night work through gastrointestinal irregularity. You're living Hawah's story. You can't know what the demands are on my time or why it's important for me to have a yoga practice. You know why it's important for you to have a yoga practice. You know why it's important for you to eat things. So I eat things based on what I have identified in terms of a pattern and how it shows up in my life. So when I think about, my participatory role in story, I can only be in the business of the isness. Right? My auntie said, your responsibility to life is really two words: respond and ability. Your ability to respond. And that is governed solely by your awareness. So
Love that. I love that, Chris.
That's my auntie Valerie.
Yeah, thank you, Auntie Valerie.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, thank you, wonderful, incredible parents and beings that have brought you. Thank you for weaving your life and my life together, and however we've been able to dance and weave for the past 18 years. I want to honor the amount of incredible, deep conversations we have had over almost 2 decades. This conversation is not in a vacuum, and I do want to honor that you have to go move your body.
I do.
And you have to go be embodied.
What if it was a get to, not a got to?
Well, you get to.
Yes.
You get to go
with your permission
and move your body. And so with that, I want to say that all the listeners are probably sad because we're just getting warmed up. I actually feel like it's just getting juicy, and I'm almost like still wanting to follow up, but we're going to end it now. But before we do,
we can do an extended part 2. I'm certainly happy, like I said in the text exchange, I'm happy to talk about anything, but what has captured my attention is this documentary I'm working on called See the Court, and it is about subtle shifts in perspective and how they change perception, particularly for Black and brown kids in self-mastery processes around the world. So I'm taking a group of kids to Eastern Europe or Central Europe, depending upon when you draw up the map. And that's this year. Next year, we're going to West Africa. And the goal is to give these kids a chance to be in a place, in physical space, in an emotional space, and in a story other than where they have constructed their sense of identity. And so I leave you with that teaser. I want to have a whole conversation with you about that.
And positive youth development. And for our listeners, we're going to put links to Chris's GoFundMe campaign, which is funding the film called See the Court, and funding his work right now in bringing young people and youth overseas for a life-changing experience in Europe. So we're going to put all that in the show notes and the episode notes. Any other last things we want to give people to find you or connect with you, Chris, so that they can follow up and learn about you, or maybe even come see you as a practitioner?
Yeah. My Instagram for my clinic is Be Well Natural, no separations. The social for my not-for-profit or the community work intergenerational self-mastery program is called elevated_legacy_org. You could just look us up on the web, www.elevatedlegacy.org. If you want to book an appointment, you're in the Bay Area, and you want to have that experience, that's www.bewellnatural.com. And so you can just pick a time that works for you. I also do Zoom calls or virtual conversations for coaching if folks want to do that. You would just pick a time interval that works for you, and you can choose it as an initial session. We would just be doing distance work. But I've found that can be profoundly impactful as well.
We'll have all of that in the show notes. We'll have links
Cool.
in the show notes to all your work, to your social handles, and to the GoFundMe page.
Cool.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, brother, for always enlivening, enlightening, and for exploring.
Yeah.
Internal
I love you, brother.
And external consciousness. Love you, brother. Talk to you soon.
Okay, peace.
Everlutionary, transforming and healing the world, is brought to you by me, Hawah Kasat. If you would like to find out more about my story, head to hawahkasat.com and visit social media, where I'm active on Instagram, Substack, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook. Be sure to share this podcast with a friend, and to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thank you for listening. Stay in touch. Peace.